So in this Yin Yoga practice, as we spend time in various poses, the meditation will be woven in, as I mentioned. And we want to consider each pose a container for this meditation practice. It's a container of time and experience. And so we'll take up our first pose, and I'll talk a little bit about the physicality of each pose before giving some silence and a bit of the meditative instruction. So first pose, let's do child's pose. And you can do this pose in any number of ways. You probably have a favorite child's pose, and it would be just fine to settle into that now. But in case you're curious, I'll show you a few variations. So child's pose is often done with shins down on the mat. Maybe thighs together. And we bring our torso forward and down and our sit bones back, and we rest. Some folks like to do the pose with the knees wide and bringing the torso between the legs and perhaps resting here. And then, of course, there's child's pose inverted gravity, lying on your back and bringing the knees in. That's child's pose too. Basically, child's pose is a protective posture, our inner body, our body closing inwardly on itself. So, on your shins, knees together or wide, on your back, any of these positions will do. And many of us will feel better in the pose if we have something, if we're doing the shins down version, if we have something behind our knees. And maybe something under the head. So I encourage you to find a position that feels appropriate for you, in which you can settle in and feel relatively comfortable. We're not shying away from sensation in Yin Yoga, of course. In fact, we expect it. And in some poses, sensation will be stronger than in others. This pose is deceptive. Many people come from other styles of yoga and think this is a resting pose. But in Yin Yoga, we hold our poses 3 to 5 minutes each. And for that reason, any pose really can start to feel agitating in the body. There can be a lot of strong sensation. So I encourage you to be with the sensation and to let the experience of strong sensation inform you about how the mind responds to the body when the body is a domain of distress. Having settled in physically, I'd like to say a few words about the rain practice that we'll be weaving in with our Yin Yoga poses. RAIN stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. It is a self-compassion practice. It is designed to transform suffering. In other words, when we begin practice, we are with difficulty, and by the end, we feel whole and spacious. So in RAIN, we are purposefully working with places where we feel stuck in life. In fact, we start by recalling something specific on purpose, a situation, in which there was discomfort. Maybe there's been conflict with a family member, or the pain of a mistake or a failure, the pain of addiction, a conversation you regret. So I'm inviting you to call to mind purposefully, with kindness, something that's felt difficult for you. So you want to enter this experience. Recall and even feel what it was like. What were the sounds, the sights, the feelings, the flavor of this circumstance or event. Just a few more moments in this pose, which has great physical and energetic benefit, even when we are not focusing on that aspect of practice, and instead calling to mind, to start our rain meditation, calling to mind something that feels as though it's in between us and freedom. So one strike of the bowl will signal that it is time, if you'd like, to change poses. I'll offer the next pose with the note that you're welcome to stay in child's pose as long as you'd like. You might come up and out of child's pose and rest on your front or your back for a spell, sort of allowing the stronger sensations to neutralize, if you will. So you have as much time as you'd like for that. This is very much a self-directed practice in that way. For those of you who would like to move on into the next posture, I'm going to offer Sleeping Swan. Some of you know it as Pigeon, and there are a lot of options, including an option to be on your back in this pose as well as with the last pose. So in Sleeping Swan, I'll demonstrate it in one basic way first, and of course I'll give you a few options. So I'm going to take my right leg into the position first, into the pose. So the target area will be the right hip. So right shin comes forward, and I scooch backward on top of my left leg. And usually something stops us. It's usually the tissues in our right hip, or it's the floor. If your right hip is not sitting on the floor, please find something, some sort of prop, a block, a blanket, something soft, if possible, to put between your hip and the floor so that you can feel stable and as if both hip bones are facing forward and are equidistant to the floor. And then, of course, I'm up on my palms at the moment, but many people will come down, maybe to forearms for the pose. And some folks who come down to their forearms will tip their forehead forward and rest it on a block. You're welcome, of course, to put the torso all the way down on the floor. And anything in between. One of my favorite in-betweens is using the harder props, the blocks, to keep elbows up and then rest my chin in my hands. So, if your hips, your knees, any part of your body makes it clear that this position is not appropriate for you, not a problem. Let's try it on our back. From your back, you would cross your right ankle to your left knee. You may stay right like this, or maybe apply a little bit of pressure to the inner right knee. And as many of you know, there's always the option of drawing the left leg towards the left shoulder, interlacing the fingers in the back of that leg or the front of the shin. So I'll sit up so you can hear me speak better, but once you're settled in, I invite you to stay. So while in our last pose we contacted a circumstance or an event that has felt difficult for us, it has challenged us, so once again, what is the essence, that charge of feeling associated with this circumstance? In our body, in our heart, and our mind, how is the memory of this challenging situation received? How do we contact this without fleeing? Is it even appropriate? So with a rain practice, we want to be sure that we've chosen to work with something that's within the window of tolerance. It has to have a charge to it for us to practice transforming suffering. And yet it should not be something that is triggering to a degree where the container we are holding for ourselves is not sufficient. So this is the R of rain that we're in, recognizing that something is obstructing our sense of freedom, is between us and ease. And we're remembering, we're feeling its essence in our bodies, our hearts, and our minds. This is not to wallow in something difficult. This is simply to set the stage for this journey, the journey of the rain meditation. And so I'll suggest switching sides now. Take your time coming out of the pigeon pose. Feel free to spend some time in a position that feels neutral, natural. Some people prefer stillness and others prefer movement in between the poses. And so make sure you get what you need. And when you do come into sleeping swan, pigeon, on the second side, do so with a beginner's mind, freshly. How is this? And perhaps needing different props, or making different decisions about how you place your upper body on side 2. Doesn't have to be the same. So settling in. And remember that in addition to facing the ground, there is the option to lie back. Left ankle to right knee this time. Perhaps drawing the right leg toward the right shoulder. So targeting the left hip now, and by hip I just mean the general area around the joint site, above and below, in front of it, behind. But likely there will be a very specific tug in this pose. But without getting too deeply into the anatomy of it, we will just let the physical and energetic benefits of this practice arrive as we stay in stillness and attend to this matter of the heart that we've brought up. So resting in this position, which may stimulate an acceleration or an intensification of the emotions associated with the difficult circumstance that you've brought up. What is here? What is the felt response to this memory, to this difficulty? We've been spending a lot of time now in the R of rain, recognizing what's between us and freedom, recognizing the physical, emotional, and mental state associated with that. And though rain is meant to be a healing practice, if it at all feels stimulating in a way that's troubling or risky, you can drop the practice or draw your attention right into the breath. And be with your inhales and your exhales and allow the natural rhythm of your breath to stabilize your body, heart, mind system. Stay in this position as long as you'd like, or undo into something neutral, maybe lying on the front body with the forehead resting on the backs of the hands. And for those of you who would like to move on into the next position, and there is no rush, I'm just trying to give everyone leeway on both sides to create a practice at a pace that's most nourishing to you. For those of you who would like to move on, we're going to do shoelace pose, next, which also has two sides. So in shoelace, again, many options. You might simply stack your knees. And let's see, we put our right leg on top or in front in our first sleeping swan. So let's put our right knee on top. And this pose feels more possible in the body if we lift the sit bones up onto a large cushion or a block, sometimes for some of us. And then sometimes if there's a lot of space between the knees, to put a blanket in there can be nice and supportive actually for the hips. And this pose just does not feel right in all bodies. And sometimes I will instead plant the foot of the front top leg down and simply hold the knee, stabilizing the pose. Another option is to not try to cross the legs so much and to instead cross the shins. So in this case, the right shin would be in front. It can help to put, if you do this option, blocks underneath the knees and also to have something underneath the sit bones. I have my cushion, you can't see it, but always a couple of inches. So, whichever version you chose in the upper body, you can stay put. Chances are you've created a position where there is strong sensation in the hip area. You can also add a forward fold to the pose. You can walk your hands out in front of you, maybe put the elbows down and drop the forehead and round the spine slightly. Or just keeping the palms down, stabilizing a bit of a forward fold, just a tip forward at the hips. And then, as I demonstrated with pigeon, I do have a favorite way to do this where I place blocks underneath my elbows and just let my chin rest in my hands. So once you've found your position, do make sure you have the props that are appropriately supporting your joints, particularly the hips and the knees in this pose. The strong sensation that's likely produced should be felt in soft tissue. It should feel as though you're not going beyond an edge, so to speak, but maybe just approaching it. And making sure the position we chose isn't so stimulating that it causes us to tense up in other areas of the body. So everywhere you can, soften. We started moving into the A of rain a little bit. Allow. Continuing to be with the circumstance we brought to mind and allowing the emotions and thoughts associated with it to arise and including them. Allowing is saying yes. Allowing is letting be. You might even experiment with whispering to yourself, yes, in response to really noticing and feeling what's present. You might whisper, this belongs. feel into the transition to the other side. Would you like to simply switch sides, or would you like to create some space in between, coming into a neutral position at first? Maybe leaning back on the hands and stretching the legs out and allowing all the tissues in the mid-body to become soft. But when you do decide to move into side two, remember to do so freshly, not with the expectation that it will be like side one. And so deciding about your position, about the props, about the degree to which you lean forward. And once you've set up physically, resting with the confidence that the physical and energetic benefits of practice are accumulating. And using this time to return to rain, moving into the eye of rain, investigate. So here's where we touch back into that inquiry. Where's the imprint? What is the imprint in the body, heart, and mind of this difficulty? Where is it held in the body? Are there distinct sensations that I'm aware of, associated with the emotions associated with the situation? Is there heat, prickliness, pain? Do you feel squeezed, stretched? And circling back too, as you locate the sensations in the body, what emotions are here? So toggling back and forth. Fear, anger, grief, regret. Underneath this complex of sensation and emotion, is there a belief? There's something wrong with me, or I'm not enough. Rain is transformative because it is a practice of radical acceptance. And so to all of these difficult sensations, emotions, and even beliefs, can we soften in response and open, acknowledge their presence? And key to the practice, you might ask yourself, how can I help this part of me that's suffering? So I invite you to consider starting to unwind from this position and resting now into Shavasana, where we will complete rain by tending to ourselves with deep kindness and care. If there are any positions or movements you'd like to take, before resting in Shavasana, that's absolutely fine. Again, please find a way to take this practice at a pace that's nourishing for you. Get everything you need. Pillow, blanket, props underneath the backs of the knees, eye pillow, whatever it is. Or if you'd like a very simple Shavasana without any accoutrement, that's fine too. But the act of setting up Shavasana in a way that is nourishing for you, it is an expression of self-compassion. Not trying to rush into position, and even though you'd like that blanket, not getting it for yourself. Getting everything you need. It's the simplest expression of care. And the parts of you that need to receive that will. So we were moving from the I of rain, investigate, into the N, which is nurture. This is where we are responsive to the part of us that is hurting. This wounded part, how does it want me to be with it? You can ask. Does it need acceptance? Or just your company? Forgiveness? Or love? Though you are resting in Shavasana, you may take a hand to the heart and whisper inwardly, it's okay. You might remind yourself to trust your goodness. You are remembering your goodness and bringing it here. And as you offer, out of this goodness, you offer unconditional kindness and presence to your inner life. Sense the possibility of relaxing into presence fully. Feel yourself as the unconditional presence that naturally responded to the hurting part. Resting into presence that is inclusive, kind, expansive in its inclusivity, vast, spacious, loving awareness. Please take all the time you'd like to sit up. If you'd like to stay in Shavasana, maybe just turn your Zoom off and stay as long as you'd like. Or taking all the time you need to come up to sit. So we can lift our gaze to each other one last time. Remembering the relational field in which we were practicing. Strange though it may still seem to practice in this way. So, in recognition of my teacher, Sarah Powers, and the rituals she begins and ends all classes with, I invite you to, at the sound of the first chime, take your hands together in front of your insight center, the forehead. Recognizing our intention to move forward wakefully. At the sound of the second bell, hands at heart center in recognition of our intention to move forward and live open-heartedly. Grounded in the seat of awareness, down in the lower belly, the Dantian, the Hara. And maybe bowing down, earth is our witness.